The sea crashes against the jagged cliffs of Crete, its waves echoing like ancient drums. As the sun dips below the horizon, the ruins cast long, distorted shadows across the earth, shadows that seem to whisper of secrets buried deep in time. For centuries, travelers, scholars, and dreamers have spoken of a labyrinth so vast, so intricate, that no map could ever hope to capture it. A place said to be designed by the genius Daedalus himself, where walls twisted endlessly, and at its heart lurks something far more terrifying than stone and darkness. Was it truly the prison of the monstrous Minotaur, or merely a story crafted to veil forbidden truths? Could the labyrinth of King Minos have been real, concealed beneath layers of myth and silence? Tonight, we descend into that mystery, where history and legend collide, and where the impossible just might have been. They called it the Jewel of the Aegean. Long before Athens rose to glory or Sparta marched to war, there was Crete, an island where myth and history intertwined so closely that even today, it is hard to tell where one ends and the other begins. Imagine sailing across the sparkling Mediterranean waters, the sea breeze carrying the scent of salt and wild thyme, and suddenly, on the horizon, emerges a city unlike any other. Whitewashed palaces, terraced with red columns, rise from the cliffs. Colorful frescoes, alive with dolphins, lilies, and dancers, whisper of a people who worshipped both beauty and mystery. This was the world of the Minoans. Mainstream history paints them as visionaries of art and trade. Their ships crisscrossed the seas, connecting Crete to Egypt, the Levant, and even distant Anatolia. They were not a warrior culture, at least not in the way we imagine. Their wealth came not from conquest, but from commerce. In their grand palace of Knossos, corridors wound endlessly like a labyrinth, leading into chambers adorned with vibrant paintings. Here, life seemed a celebration, a harmony between man, nature, and the divine. But beneath the polished surface of frescoes and prosperity lurked shadows. Archaeologists still debate the true purpose of those sprawling palaces. Were they merely administrative centers, or temples that concealed darker rituals? Among the frescoes of joyous dancers and leaping bulls, there are hints of something more unsettling, images scholars interpret as offerings, sacrifices, and blood spilled in honor of gods who demanded more than worship. To the Minoans, the bull was not just an animal, it was a symbol of raw power, fertility, and destruction. Myths later told of youths forced to face the bull in a deadly dance, their fate tied to survival or slaughter. The legend of King Minos, the tyrant who demanded human tribute from Athens, may not have been pure invention. Some archaeologists believe echoes of ritual sacrifice linger in the myths. Skeletal remains discovered in Cretan caves suggest offerings of children and adolescents, grim evidence that challenges the idyllic picture of a peaceful paradise. Could it be that the grandeur of Minoan culture was sustained by rituals that blurred the line between reverence and horror? And then, there are the rumors of hidden chambers. Even today, parts of Knossos remain unexcavated. Stories circulate of sealed rooms, collapsed tunnels, and artifacts quietly removed or suppressed. Was there something buried that history was not meant to remember? The labyrinth, after all, was not just a story, it was a metaphor for secrets buried in stone, secrets designed to trap both memory and truth. Here lies the paradox of Crete, a civilization admired for its art, its innovation, its seafaring might, yet haunted by myths of monsters and sacrifice. Was King Minos a wise ruler, or a despot who built his dynasty on fear? Was the bull merely an icon, or a reminder of something far more terrifying? As we step deeper into the halls of Knossos, the line between myth and history begins to blur. And where that line disappears, the real mystery begins. In the heart of ancient Crete, beneath the blazing sun and the crashing waves of the Aegean, lies one of mythology's most chilling stories, a tale of a monster, a labyrinth, and the thin line between myth and memory. The Minotaur, half man and half bull, has haunted human imagination for millennia. But was it only a story meant to frighten and instruct? Or could there have been a darker truth concealed in its winding passages? According to legend, King Minos of Crete angered the god Poseidon by refusing to sacrifice a sacred bull. As punishment, the gods cursed Minos's wife, Passageways, with a terrible desire that birthed a creature of both man and beast. To contain the abomination, the engineer Daedalus constructed a labyrinth so complex that no one who entered could ever find their way out. Within those walls, the Minotaur lurked, an ever-hungry terror demanding sacrifices. The Athenians knew its hunger well. Every 9 years, or perhaps every year depending on the telling, they were forced to send 7 young men and 7 maidens into the labyrinth as tribute. None returned. That is, until Theseus, Prince of Athens, volunteered himself. With courage, cunning, and the guidance of Minos's daughter Ariadne, who gave him a simple ball of thread to retrace his steps, Theseus descended into the maze. In the suffocating darkness, he confronted the beast. And with sword in hand, he slew the Minotaur, ending the bloody tribute and securing his place as one of Greece's greatest heroes. It is a tale brimming with archetypes, the hero's journey, the monster that embodies chaos, the labyrinth symbolizing the trials of life. Yet, the enduring mystery is why this story, among countless Greek myths, feels so tethered to something real. Could the labyrinth have been more than allegory? Could a monstrous figure, or at least a monstrous practice, have inspired it? Scholars have long debated the possibilities. Some argue the Minotaur myth is a symbolic retelling of Minoan dominance over Athens, a political allegory transformed into story. The labyrinth becomes Crete itself, a sprawling empire that entraps its vassals. The beast, rather than flesh and blood, represents the inescapable burden of tribute and subjugation. Psychologists interpret it differently, the labyrinth as the subconscious mind, the Minotaur as our hidden fears, rage, or desires. Theseus's victory symbolizes humanity's attempt to overcome the chaos within. In this reading, the story transcends history and becomes a mirror for the human condition. But there are whispers of something more tangible. Archaeologists have uncovered vast palace complexes on Crete, particularly at Knossos, so labyrinthine in design that early explorers believed they had found the inspiration for the myth itself. Corridors, chambers, and twisting staircases stretch endlessly, echoing the descriptions of Daedalus's creation. Within these ruins, frescoes depict bulls and rituals of dangerous acrobatics, where youths leapt over the horns of charging animals. To the uninitiated, these rituals may have looked like sacrifices, feeding speculation that the Minotaur was less a monster and more a reflection of bloody ceremonial practices. And then there are the darker theories, that beneath the myth lies a memory of something terrible, perhaps a deformed child born of royalty, hidden away in shame, whose story warped into legend. Or perhaps captives were forced into deadly games in those twisting halls, their screams echoing until only the story remained. Fact or fable, the myth of the Minotaur forces us to ask, how much of what we call mythology is invention, and how much is distorted memory of real horrors? Each retelling preserves fragments of truth, like bones buried in shifting sand. The labyrinth still calls to us, not just as a physical structure but as a metaphor for the search itself, winding paths, dead ends, and the hope of finding clarity at the center. And just as Theseus followed his thread, we, too, must follow the strands of history, myth, and archaeology to uncover what lies at the heart of the story. For in the myths of monsters, we often find reflections of ourselves, and the haunting possibility that what we dismiss as fantasy may have once walked the earth. For centuries, the ruins of Crete were whispered about in hushed tones. Sailors spoke of buried palaces swallowed by earthquakes, of labyrinths where monsters prowled, and of a king so cruel his name lingered like a curse, Minos. Yet, for all the legends, no one had dared, or cared, to search for the truth. Until a man named Arthur Evans arrived. Evans was not an ordinary archaeologist. In fact, he was more of a dreamer, a man obsessed with myths that others dismissed as bedtime stories. Born into privilege, educated in Oxford's finest halls, he had the resources, the connections, and most importantly, the audacity to chase legends across the Mediterranean. Where others saw fables, Evans saw evidence waiting to be unearthed. In the year 1900, on the island of Crete, Evans struck a deal with the landowners of a humble hill called Kephala. Beneath its soil, he was certain, lay the remains of a civilization older than Greece itself. When his workers broke ground, they unearthed clay tablets marked with strange symbols, scripts no scholar could read. Evans felt vindicated. These were not random scratches. They were the language of a forgotten people, proof of a kingdom that predated Homer and rivaled the great dynasties of Egypt. What he uncovered next would shock the world. Hallways carved with intricate frescoes. Staircases spiraling into shadow. Vast storage chambers brimming with pit hoi, giant jars that once held oil, wine, and grain. And at the heart of it all, a sprawling maze of corridors so confusing that visitors easily lost their way. To Evans, it could only mean one thing: the fabled labyrinth of the Minotaur was real. Newspapers of the time called it Europe's first civilization. Evans, intoxicated by his discovery, proclaimed he had found the palace of King Minos himself. He named the people who once lived there the Minoans, reviving a legend and cementing it into history. To the public, Evans was not just an archaeologist, he was a conjurer of myths, a man who had transformed a story into stone. But here lies the controversy. Evans was not content with ruins alone. With his own imagination as his guide, he began reconstructing the site, pouring concrete over ancient stones, painting frescoes as he believed they once looked, even designing rooms to match his vision of a mythical labyrinth. Critics later argued that Evans had blurred the line between discovery and invention. Was he revealing history, or rewriting it? Some historians accuse him of creating a Disney version of the past, a romanticized palace shaped more by Greek myth than by archaeological fact. Others defend him, insisting that without Evans, the Minoans might still lie hidden beneath the Cretan soil, forgotten by the world. Yet the question lingers: when Evans declared he had uncovered the labyrinth, did he find truth, or did he project myth onto stone? His reconstructions still stand today, a mixture of genuine antiquity and early 20th century imagination. Tourists wander through halls that may be partly ancient, partly Evans' fantasy, never quite knowing where one ends and the other begins. Evans' work forces us to ask, is history only what we dig up, or is it also what we choose to believe? His discoveries opened the door to the Minoan world, but they also cast a shadow of doubt. Was the labyrinth real, or was it conjured by the man who dared to give myth a shape? And as we step into the next part of this mystery, we must wonder, did Evans truly reveal Europe's first civilization, or did he create a legend that still deceives us today? Beneath the sunlit hills of Crete lies a labyrinth of stone that has baffled archaeologists for more than a century. The Palace of Knossos, often hailed as Europe's first great city, is not a palace in the traditional sense. It is a puzzle of corridors, staircases, and chambers that seem to defy all logic. Tourists wander its reconstructed walls today, but hidden in the cracks of these ruins are mysteries that refuse to be solved. Take, for instance, the underground passages. Some lead nowhere, ending abruptly in sealed walls, as if intentionally designed to confuse intruders. Others twist downward into darkness, with no clear purpose. Were these simply storage areas for grain and oil, as many scholars suggest? Or do they hint at something deeper, perhaps the legendary labyrinth that trapped the mythical Minotaur? The official story insists on practicality, but the sheer complexity seems to whisper of secrets far stranger. Then there are the chambers. In certain sections of Knossos, rooms were found tightly sealed, their contents untouched for millennia. Within, archaeologists uncovered ritual vessels, strange figurines, and traces of sacrifices. To some, this is evidence of ordinary religious practice. To others, it suggests something more unsettling: hidden sanctuaries where blood offerings once echoed in the dark. The myth of the Minotaur may not have been born from imagination alone, it may have been a distorted memory of very real rituals carried out in these chambers. The walls themselves also tell a cryptic story. Frescoes depict powerful bulls leaping over men, women dressed as priestesses, and scenes of ceremonies shrouded in symbolism. Bulls, in particular, dominate Minoan art, raising the question, why? Was this animal merely sacred, a symbol of fertility and strength? Or was the bull a mask, an icon pointing towards something terrifying, an ancient cult bound to sacrifice and submission? The frescoes are vibrant yet elusive, their meaning slipping away like shadows on stone. Beyond Knossos, similar anomalies surface in other Minoan sites. At Phaistos, archaeologists unearthed the mysterious Phaistos disk, covered in symbols no one has ever deciphered. Its signs, spirals, weapons, animals, are arranged in a way that suggests language, yet it speaks in silence. Was it a record of rituals? A map of hidden tunnels? Or a prayer to forgotten gods? Conventional history admits ignorance, but the object radiates an air of forbidden knowledge. And then there are the tunnels. Modern surveys hint at networks extending beyond what is visible, passages linking different complexes, and perhaps even running deep into the earth. Mainstream explanations chalk these up to drainage or storage. But the darker interpretation is unavoidable, that the Minoans created hidden pathways not for water or food, but for something secret, something they did not want the world above to see. Some believe these tunnels once led to subterranean chambers where ceremonies were performed away from prying eyes. Others imagine caches of knowledge, sealed before the sudden collapse of Minoan civilization. All these clues, the sealed chambers, the frescoes, the disk, the tunnels, create a picture that is both fascinating and troubling. They speak of a society advanced in art and architecture, yet shrouded in enigma. For every logical explanation, a haunting alternative lurks in the background. Were the Minoans pioneers of civilization, or custodians of something far darker? Did they build palaces, or prisons for secrets the world was never meant to know? As we trace these strange clues in the ruins, one thing becomes clear: the line between myth and history is thinner than we imagine. And if the myths of the Labyrinth and the Minotaur are rooted in reality, then the ruins of Knossos may not just be remnants of a lost civilization, they may be the gateway to something hidden, waiting to be rediscovered. The labyrinth, the very word conjures images of shadowy corridors and whispers echoing off stone walls. For centuries, scholars debated whether it was merely an architectural marvel or something far more sinister. But what if its twisting passages weren't built just to confuse? What if they were designed to conceal? Ancient texts speak in riddles. They describe ceremonies carried out deep within chambers that no sunlight ever touched. Some accounts mention sacrifices to appease the gods of the underworld, offerings made not in crops or treasures, but in blood. The myth of the Minotaur itself, half man, half beast, has often been dismissed as symbolic. Yet what if the creature was never meant to be taken literally? What if it represented the terrifying ritual of casting human lives into the labyrinth's belly, never to return? Archaeologists, cautious as ever, tread carefully on such ground. They remind us that myth often exaggerates, that bones found in caves or chambers may belong to ordinary burials or victims of plague. Yet cracks appear in their restraint. Excavations at sites across Crete have uncovered child skeletons showing signs of deliberate cutting. Bones that suggest feasting, human remains mingled with animal ones, as if both were consumed in the same grim meal. To call it coincidence strains belief. And then, there are the altars. Stone slabs stained dark, positioned at the heart of sanctuaries, as though prepared for offerings. Chemical analyses whisper of blood residue, though the scientific community hesitates to declare whose blood it was. Animal? Or human? In the shadows of the labyrinth story, either answer feels equally haunting. Even more unsettling are the frescoes. Brightly painted, they depict figures vaulting over bulls, their bodies twisted mid-leap. Official explanations insist this was a sport, a daring acrobatic dance with death. But the expressions on some of those painted faces, rigid, terrified, tell another tale. Could the bull vaulting have been less a game and more a ritualized ordeal? A test of survival where failure meant blood spilled upon the altar. The line between sport and sacrifice grows thinner with every discovery. Myths speak of 7 youths and 7 maidens sent into the labyrinth each year. Historians call it allegory, perhaps a memory of tribute paid by defeated cities. But when the archaeological record reveals young bones and ceremonial chambers, allegory begins to take on a chillingly literal dimension. And so, the labyrinth transforms before our eyes. No longer just stone corridors, but a stage, an arena of belief, fear, and devotion. Here, human life was currency, the price of keeping order with gods and kings alike. Was the Minotaur a beast of flesh, or the embodiment of a system that demanded blood to sustain power? The chilling truth may be this: the labyrinth was never a prison for a monster, but for the victims chosen to feed a ritual cycle. Each death renewing the myth, each scream echoing in the dark corridors, keeping the legend alive. What lies beneath the ruins now is silence. Yet silence often hides more than it reveals. And as the spades of archaeologists scrape closer to untouched chambers, one can't help but wonder, will the earth one day confirm the whispers of sacrifice, or will the truth remain forever sealed in shadows? Beneath the surface of history lies a chilling pattern, labyrinths not confined to Crete, but scattered across the ancient world like echoes of a forgotten design. While the myth of the Minotaur placed the most famous maze in Knossos, archaeologists and chroniclers have uncovered evidence that labyrinths existed in Egypt, Italy, and beyond. These were not simple mazes for amusement, they were sprawling, intricate structures, built with precision that seems almost impossible for their time. The Greek historian Herodotus wrote of a labyrinth at Hawera in Egypt, an enormous stone complex with 12 courts and thousands of chambers, so vast that even he, a man who had walked through the Great Pyramids, declared it surpassed them in wonder. Though its remains lie buried beneath desert sands, fragments and foundations whisper of a structure designed not merely to awe, but to confuse, control, and conceal. Some believe it was a tomb. Others argue it was a prison for secrets the pharaohs wished never to be found. Travel west, and you reach the shadowy ruins of Etruscan Italy. Beneath cities like Orvieto, networks of twisting tunnels stretch into darkness, forming subterranean labyrinths that were later expanded by Romans. Were these ritual sites, prisons, or gateways to the underworld? To walk their passages is to feel the weight of deliberate design, corridors that lead nowhere, chambers that loop back on themselves, paths crafted to unsettle both mind and body. Even in far-off cultures, echoes of the labyrinth reappear. In India, ancient stepwells were carved with winding staircases that spiral deep underground. In South America, the Nazca lines include maze-like patterns stretching across desert plains, visible only from the sky. Could these designs all share a hidden function, an attempt by different civilizations to replicate a universal archetype of power and mystery? What makes this more unsettling is the psychological dimension. A labyrinth is not just stone and passage, it is an architecture of control. Step inside, and you surrender your sense of direction, your freedom, even your sanity. To be lost within a labyrinth is to be trapped in someone else's design, unable to trust your own instincts, always circling, never escaping. Was this why rulers and priests favored them? Not as monuments of beauty, but as tools of dominance. Perhaps the myth of the Minotaur was not a singular story, but a metaphor repeated across cultures, the labyrinth as a prison for something dangerous, whether beast, secret, or human will itself. If Crete's maze held the monster of legend, what then did Egypt's labyrinth conceal? What did the Etruscans seek to bury in endless tunnels? One unsettling possibility emerges: the labyrinth was never just a place, but a system, an ancient technology designed to disorient and subdue. And if such structures existed across the world, the question remains, who first conceived it, and why did so many civilizations follow? The answer may lie not in stone corridors, but in the myths they inspired. For centuries, history has been written not only by the victors, but by those who decide what truths are safe to reveal. The ruins of Knossos, buried beneath layers of dust and silence, are more than just an archaeological site, they are a battlefield of knowledge, where myth and evidence clash, and where unanswered questions raise the possibility of deliberate suppression. Why, even today, are large areas beneath Knossos still sealed off and unexcavated? Official explanations point to limited resources, structural risks, or a desire to preserve fragile sites for future generations. Yet for many, these answers feel strangely inadequate. If the palace truly holds nothing more than broken pottery and faded walls, then why such secrecy? What if beneath those stones lie chambers that would overturn everything we think we know about human civilization? Take Sir Arthur Evans, the archaeologist who brought Knossos to the world's attention. He presented the Minoans as a peaceful, enlightened society, an island utopia untouched by war. But in his eagerness to craft this vision, did he ignore or even hide evidence that contradicted it? Critics suggest he downplayed signs of violence, ritual sacrifice, and power struggles, favoring a sanitized narrative that better suited Western ideals. Some go further, arguing that Evans was pressured, by political interests, by academic institutions, or even by governments, to maintain a version of history that aligned with Europe's self-image rather than reality. The pattern is familiar. Throughout history, discoveries that don't fit neatly into accepted timelines are often dismissed, destroyed, or locked away in museum basements. Could Knossos be yet another case of inconvenient truths being carefully managed? And then comes the modern question: why do governments and institutions still limit access? Satellite scans and ground-penetrating radar hint at undiscovered structures around Crete, yet excavation permits remain scarce, delayed, or outright denied. Some believe this is to protect heritage. Others whisper that the real reason is fear that beneath the palace lie records, technologies, or even artifacts that would force us to rewrite not just Minoan history, but the history of civilization itself. Imagine the consequences if such a discovery proved that advanced knowledge existed long before Egypt or Mesopotamia. The entire foundation of what we consider the birth of civilization could collapse. Schools, textbooks, and centuries of scholarship would have to be rewritten. In such a scenario, suppression would not only be convenient, it would be necessary to maintain social and academic order. The shadows around Knossos suggest that the truth may be far more complex than the story we are told. Whether by accident or by design, parts of history have been locked away, waiting for the day when someone dares to open the forbidden chambers. And so, we arrive at the most haunting question of all: if knowledge is power, then who truly holds the keys to our past? The ruins, long buried beneath jungle and sand, have not escaped the probing eyes of modern science. In recent decades, researchers armed with technology once reserved for military and space exploration have turned their gaze to these enigmatic sites. LiDAR scans slice through thick foliage, stripping away the forest like a magician's cloth, revealing beneath the canopy what human eyes could never see: sprawling geometric patterns, hidden plazas, and entire complexes thought lost to time. Ground-penetrating radar sends silent pulses into the earth, returning echoes that suggest chambers, tunnels, and walls, structures that seem deliberate, but remain sealed, inaccessible, and frustratingly beyond reach. For archaeologists, these breakthroughs are exhilarating. Ancient myths that once sounded like fevered legends now gain startling credibility. LiDAR surveys in Central America, for example, revealed vast urban networks stretching across hundreds of square miles, cities capable of supporting populations larger than London in the Middle Ages. The myth of a forgotten golden empire begins to sound less like fantasy and more like a misremembered truth. And yet, for every scientific triumph, deeper riddles emerge. One radar scan suggests a passage leading into the heart of a pyramid. But when excavators attempt to follow, the tunnels collapse or prove sealed by stones cut with such precision that even modern drills struggle to penetrate. Were these closures natural, the result of time and erosion? Or deliberate, designed by ancient engineers who wished to hide something forever? Science records the data, but the question lingers unanswered. Magnetic anomalies add to the puzzle. In certain sites, compasses spin erratically, GPS falters, and instruments behave as though some unseen force disrupts their function. Geologists insist this is the natural effect of mineral concentrations beneath the ground, yet legends whisper of power sources buried deep, remnants of a civilization that harnessed energies we cannot yet replicate. For explorers standing in the ruins, with their technology glitching in real time, the distinction between myth and mineral feels less certain. Then there are the discoveries not shared publicly. Researchers admit, quietly, that not all findings make it into published papers. Some tunnels mapped by radar remain unexcavated, their contents unknown. Some anomalies are documented, but explained away or filed under inconclusive. Whispers circulate of artifacts removed under the cover of night, transported not to museums, but to private collections or secretive institutions. Here, the line between science and conspiracy blurs. Is this careful scholarship, withholding claims until verified? Or is knowledge being deliberately suppressed? And so, the dance continues, data against mystery, evidence against speculation. Science brings us tantalizingly close to answers, only to halt at the threshold of the unknown. For every scan that reveals hidden chambers, there is a locked door that will not open. For every magnetic disturbance explained by geology, another anomaly defies neat categorization. We are left with an uneasy tension. The rational world insists these are simply puzzles awaiting the right tools, while the myths remind us that some doors are not meant to be opened. Yet this very tension is what keeps the story alive. The more science uncovers, the more profound the questions become. What were these people protecting? Why do the ruins resist intrusion, as though time itself conspires with stone to keep their secrets? In the clash between hard data and myth's shadow, the labyrinth deepens, and the mystery refuses to yield. For centuries, the whispers of the labyrinth have lingered like an echo no one can silence. Was it a fortress of stone, a prison of the damned, or something far stranger, an idea meant to trap the human mind rather than the body? Every culture that hinted at its existence wrapped the truth in riddles, as though protecting something too dangerous for open eyes. Perhaps it was never a place, but a veil between worlds, a riddle that punishes those who dare to solve it. And yet, even without its confirmed presence, the labyrinth has already done its work. It has imprisoned countless imaginations, from scholars and explorers to poets and mystics. It has pulled men into deserts, mountains, and oceans, chasing the ghost of a design that may only ever exist in fragments of myth. In the end, does it matter whether the labyrinth was real stone, carved by forgotten hands, or a construct of collective fear? Its power lies not in discovery, but in obsession. Some ruins resist being found, not because they are lost, but because they are guarding themselves. Could the labyrinth be one of these? A structure, or a secret, so carefully concealed by time and intention that the very act of searching is its own trap. Perhaps that is why the stories remain just out of reach, broken like scattered tiles of a forgotten mosaic. And so, the labyrinth endures. Not on a map, but in our hunger for the hidden. It lingers in the silence between what we know and what we fear. If it exists, then maybe it was never meant to be uncovered. And if it doesn't, then perhaps the labyrinth has already achieved its purpose, because as you leave this story behind, one question will continue to echo in your mind: what if the most dangerous labyrinth is not beneath the earth, but within us?